I still remember the echo of my father's words as they thundered through the small, crumbling house where I'd grown up. "You're good for nothing. You're not a son, you're not a daughter, you're just a burden." I stood there trembling, a girl clutching a tiny duffel bag, unsure of what the world held for someone who had never been allowed to dream. My father's anger wasn't sudden, it had been building for years. He had always seen me as weak, someone who couldn't lift a hammer, fix a pipe, or match his unrealistic expectations of obedience and silence. I was bookish, curious, and often questioned rules, traits he despised. He wanted a daughter who cooked, cleaned, and stayed quiet. I was the complete opposite. That day, I packed whatever I could, left through the rusted gate, and didn't look back. I had no plan, no money, and nowhere to go. But I had a fire inside me that he hadn't noticed. I spent the first few nights on the floor of a local train station, eating nothing but stale bread and hiding from groups of boys who circled like vultures. It was during one of those terrifying nights that I noticed a group of women walking in uniform, straight-backed and proud. I didn't know who they were, but I knew I wanted to be like them. The way they walked made me feel safe. That image stayed in my head even as I moved into a women's shelter and started doing odd jobs. I cleaned floors, washed dishes, and saved every coin I could. Eventually, I asked one of the older ladies at the shelter, "How do you become like those women? In uniform?" She smiled and said, "Join the army, you'll never feel powerless again." My journey to the military wasn't immediate. I first had to complete my education. I enrolled in a night school using the little savings I had and worked days at a construction site. I was the only girl there, and the men mocked me endlessly until one day I lifted a bag of cement that one of them couldn't. They stopped laughing after that. I studied under streetlights, memorized history while scrubbing floors, and practiced math during my breaks. After a year of tireless struggle, I applied to a military preparatory school that accepted women. The entrance test was tough. I failed it twice, but I kept returning each time, more determined than the last. On my third attempt, I passed. I cried silently the night I got my acceptance letter. The training academy was brutal. It pushed my body and mind beyond every limit. I had never run more than 2 kilometers in my life, and now I was running 10 daily. The first week I fainted twice, but I never gave up. The instructors noticed something in me, a quiet fire, a kind of determination that wasn't loud but relentless. Some cadets mocked my background, calling me the homeless girl with a dream. I let them, because I knew what they didn't, that the shame of being kicked out by your own father fuels you in ways no discipline ever can. Every time I fell, I got back up. Every bruise reminded me of my worth, and every rank I rose reminded me that I was not worthless, I was unstoppable. Years passed. I graduated with honors and was commissioned as a second lieutenant. My first post was in a remote, mountainous region where avalanches were frequent and danger lurked at every turn. I led a small platoon of young soldiers, most of them boys who had grown up being told men lead and women follow. That belief didn't last long. On our third week, we were ambushed by armed insurgents. My quick thinking and command saved lives. I didn't scream, I didn't panic, I led. After that day, my soldiers looked at me differently. Respect replaced doubt. I was promoted to captain in 2 years, then major, and eventually lieutenant colonel. But what stayed with me the most wasn't the rank, it was how I kept proving people wrong, one mission at a time. I started mentoring young girls who wanted to join the forces. Many came from homes like mine, homes where daughters were ignored, ridiculed, or told to stay small. I told them, they'll say you can't. That's when you show them you can. My photo started appearing in training halls across the country with the quote, "From homeless to hero." But to me, I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who refused to accept that her worth could be measured by her father's anger. Still, deep down, I wondered if he'd ever heard of my name. I never tried to find him, not out of hate, but because I had nothing left to say. Then one day, everything changed. I received orders for a transfer back to my hometown, in charge of a new cadet training base being built near the very street I'd once walked down in shame. It felt surreal. I hadn't been back in over a decade. As the convoy rolled into town, my mind was flooded with memories: the cracked sidewalks, the corner tea stall, the broken swing in front of what used to be our yard. I didn't intend to visit the house. I had no interest in ghosts, but fate had other plans. One afternoon, while overseeing cadet drills, I noticed a man limping outside the base, staring through the gates. His face was older, thinner, but the eyes, those were unmistakable. My father, he looked lost, confused, and fragile. I could have ignored him, but something pulled me forward. I walked up in full uniform, boots clicking on concrete, and stopped inches away. He looked up, slowly, and froze. You're, he stuttered. I stood tall, my chest filled with something that wasn't pride or revenge, it was peace. Major General Aisha Zamon, I said, offering a crisp salute. He looked like he might collapse. For a long moment he said nothing. Then finally he whispered, I was wrong. And just like that, the years between us disappeared into the silence. The news of my return spread through the town like wildfire. Old neighbors peeked from their windows, some recognizing the girl who once begged for food scraps, now adorned in medals and authority. My father, though shocked and humbled, was more fragile than I remembered. Life had not been kind to him. After I left, my mother had passed and my brothers had all moved abroad, rarely visiting. He lived alone, forgotten. That night, he visited my office on base. He sat quietly, eyes lowered. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, but seeing you, it's the only thing that's made me feel alive in years. I didn't say anything. I just placed a cup of tea in front of him the same way I had once as a teenager, trembling and fearful. Only now, there was no fear, there was power. But not the kind that humiliates, it was the power of self-worth. I told him, you taught me who I never want to become. For that, I thank you. He wept, not out of guilt but grief. That's when I realized the true victory wasn't in the rank or uniform but in facing the pain that once broke you, and not letting it shatter your spirit. I visited my old school, donated a library in my mother's name, and started a scholarship for girls from abusive homes. The plaque at the entrance reads, From Useless to Unstoppable. I was invited to speak at military academies, women's colleges, even international summits. I'd always begin the same way. I was told I was useless. I believed it once, never again. My voice became a tool, not for revenge, but for revolution. Young girls from villages, slums, and even elite cities lined up to tell me their stories. One said her father beat her for reading books. Another said she ran away after being promised to a 40-year-old man. All of them found strength in my journey, not because it was perfect, but because it began from nothing. There were moments of doubt, nights when I stared at the ceiling and wondered if anything would ever change. But what carried me through was never certainty, was sheer refusal to give up. I was later awarded the People's Star of Valor, an honor reserved for those who not only serve but inspire. During the ceremony, I saw my father in the crowd. He didn't wear fancy clothes. He just stood there, his hands folded, tears in his eyes. When I received the medal, I could have chosen anyone to dedicate it to. I said, "This is for every girl who was told to sit down, shut up, and stay small." The applause was deafening. Afterward, my father approached me, hands trembling, and asked, "Can I visit you sometimes?" I nodded, not because he deserved it, but because I did. I deserved peace. I deserved to heal. And sometimes forgiveness is more for the forgiver than the forgiven. As the years passed, my relationship with my father remained distant, but respectful. He'd visit me at base every few months, always early, always quietly. He'd sit in the visitor's lounge, sip tea, and watch the soldiers march. I once asked him, "Why do you come?" He replied, "To remind myself how wrong I was and to see what strength looks like." That was the closest thing to love he ever gave. And honestly, it was enough. My rise in the military continued. I was appointed to lead international peacekeeping missions, negotiating ceasefires, coordinating rescue operations, and ensuring that women and children in conflict zones weren't forgotten. I visited countries torn apart by war and saw girls hiding in bunkers waiting for someone to save them. I looked into their eyes and told them, "No one is coming, so we become our own heroes." Those words were tattooed into their hearts. One girl gave me a torn doll and said, "When I grow up, I want to be you." I took the doll, placed it in my office, and looked at it every day before I made any decision, because it reminded me that my pain wasn't pointless. Paved a road for others, I wasn't just a soldier anymore. I was a movement, and nothing, not even the ghosts of my past, could slow me down. I was promoted to Major General at the age of 40, one of the youngest to ever hold the title. The ceremony was grand, with top officials and media present. But for me, the most powerful moment came after, when I returned to my hometown. The mayor invited me to speak at the same school where I was once mocked for speaking out. The same classroom where I'd been slapped for being too opinionated. The principal, now retired, stood in the crowd teary-eyed. I walked up to the podium, looked around at the young girls and said, "Raise your hand if you've ever been told you're too loud, too stubborn, or too much." Almost every hand went up. I smiled. "Good. That means you're ready to lead." I told them my story, not the medals, not the honors, but the nights I cried under bridges, the mornings I cleaned toilets, and the afternoons I fought for a chance to wear a uniform. When I stepped off the stage, a line of girls followed me. They didn't ask for autographs, they asked for advice. How do I join the army? How do I survive my father's anger? I didn't sugarcoat anything. It's hard, but so are you, I told them. That day we planted 30 trees in the school courtyard, one for each girl who had applied to the military. We named the space the Garden of Resilience. Now, when I look back, it feels like someone else's story. That broken girl with a bag and no home sheet seems like a shadow, but she's still with me. She's the reason I wake up at 4 a.m. and lead by example. She's the voice in my head that says, "You didn't come this far to only come this far." My life wasn't a movie. There was no perfect ending. My father passed away quietly one winter, without drama. Envelope it read, "To the daughter who showed me what strength truly looks like, I'm proud of you." I read it once, then burned it. Not in anger, but in release. I didn't need his pride anymore. I had my own. I later visited his grave, not out of obligation, but closure. I saluted him not for who he was, but for the role he unknowingly played in shaping me. Sometimes the people who try to bury you are the same ones who water your roots, and that's okay. I used to wish for a different childhood, a kinder father, a smoother path. But now I realize the cracks are where the light gets in. I was born in a house that saw me as nothing. I rose to command thousands. Academy for girls across the country. We train them not just in combat or tactics, but in confidence, voice, and dignity. We don't just build soldiers, we build leaders, thinkers, changemakers. My story is taught as a case study in resilience. At several universities, journalists often ask, "What would you say to your father now if he were alive?" My answer is always the same: nothing. I've already said it with my life, and purpose carried me further than any anger ever could. Sometimes I visit the train station where I first slept, now renovated and bustling. I sit on the same bench and watch girls board trains with duffel bags, eyes filled with hope. I smile, knowing the cycle is breaking, knowing I had something to do with it. Who refused to give up, who took her father's rejection and built an empire of self-worth from it? So to every daughter watching, every girl hiding her tears, control, be too much, be unstoppable, be the storm that they never saw coming. Because sometimes, the girl they called useless grows up to wear stars on her shoulders and changes the world with every step she takes.